Hi there and welcome to this Ispmanager tutorial. Ispmanager is a control panel that is reliable, affordable, and secure. If you're looking for a cPanel alternative, you can use Ispmanager. In this tutorial, we are going to see how to install Ispmanager, an overview of the panel, how to set up DNS, how to add your websites, how to set up mail, how to work with users, FTP users, database users, how to handle backups, and how to work with databases, and finally how to do server protection. So if that's something you're interested in, learning how to use Ispmanager, then go ahead and start watching the tutorial. Ispmanager comes with a free trial, and you're going to see how you can license Ispmanager for your IP. So that's something you're going to cover during the installation stage. In this video, we're going to see how to install Ispmanager. Before that, I will talk about the types of licenses, the server requirements, and finally, we'll get to installing Ispmanager. Ispmanager has a very detailed documentation that can help you achieve anything that you're trying to do with the panel. If you want to read the documentation, view what is on the documentation, you need any help, you can come here under community and then you'll go to documentation. So depending on what you're looking for, just go to the right documentation. In my case, I will be using ISP Lite, Pro, or Host, and we're going to see the limitations for each in terms of websites. Here you'll see that there is documentation for different things about Ispmanager. If you're looking for answers for anything, you can always just come in here and find what you're looking for. For instance, if you want to install Ispmanager, you can just click there and you'll see that all the things that are related to installation will be here, and you can just read more about it and follow the steps. If you're lost, you can always look at the documentation. Let's talk about the types of licenses. Even before we get here, let's come back here and let's look at pricing so that we can see the different Ispmanager licenses. Here you can choose the Ispmanager type that you want. If you're looking for Lite, it will have 10 domains, limitations, 50 domains for Pro, Host, Domain, Unlimited domains. As for accounts, you can have unlimited accounts on all the Ispmanager plans. So the business version is here, and the business version is best for reselling. If you want to resell web hosting, then you can go with the business plan, which has unlimited number of domains, unlimited number of accounts. So let's come back here into Ispmanager. Types of licenses, we've looked at that. Ispmanager Lite will give you maximum of 10 domains, 50 domains for Pro, and Host will have unlimited domains. And then the types of licenses, you can have commercial licenses. Once you update, you can upgrade to any of these commercial licenses, or you can get a trial license. And that's the one that I'm going to use in this Ispmanager tutorial. And I'm going to show you how you can activate the license once we install the panel. The server requirement, make sure that the server is a fresh install. It is a clean server without anything else installed on it. As for the hardware requirements, just come into this page and look at them. You can see 1 GB RAM, 10 GB disk space. If you have more than 10 websites, go with 2 GB RAM, 20 GB hard disk, and 1 virtual CPU. If you're going to run more than 10 websites on your panel, then go with 2 virtual CPUs, 3 GB of RAM, 50 GB space, just to make sure that you have sufficient resources to run all your sites. You can come to this page and look at all these requirements on the documentation. They're under installation. And then for the supported operating systems, Alma Linux 8, CentOS 7, Debian 10, and 11. In this setup, I'm going to use Debian 11. Ubuntu is also supported up to 22.04, but you should go with this because this is the one that I found works best, and you can see it's also the one which is recommended here. Rocky Linux is also supported, Rocky Linux 8, Visi Linux is also supported. So just come here and go through all this and make sure that your server is compliant with all the requirements that have been provided on this page. Now the installation guide. Let's go to the installation guide. You should have a virtual server that you can use. In my case, I'm going to use DigitalOcean. And here are the settings I've chosen for my droplet. I'm going to use Debian 11, 2 GB server, 2 GB RAM server, but you can use 1 GB. And I'm going to use an SSH key to set up my server. And something else here on DigitalOcean, I can just put in that as my host name, and that's going to get added as my host name on the server. And I can use this to log into my panel after installation, as long as I've set up the A record for my DNS, and I will set that up in Cloudflare. And I will create my droplet. If you're following along with me, on Windows, download Git Bash. Download Git, it will come with Git Bash, and that's what I'm going to use to set up my server. If you're on a Mac, you can use Terminal. If you're on Linux, you can use Terminal as well. So I'm just going to log into my server that I've just deployed. Okay, so I've deployed a droplet. I'm just going to copy that IP address and I'm going to add it on my Cloudflare with that as my host name. So I've added the IP address here for my A records for these two, because I'm going to use this for some demonstrations at some point. So let's log into the server. Let's SSH into the server. My server was set up with SSH with an SSH key, so that's what I'm going to use to log in. If you didn't set up an SSH key, then you can log in with your password. Type yes. Control L, and then of course the first thing you want to update the server before you even start installing the panel. Update the server. So I'll let that run for a while and then we'll come back to installing the panel. Control L to clear the screen, and then I'm going to come back into the documentation. For installation, you can go into documentation and then click on installation, and then come here under installation guide. You're going to find all these steps. So we're going to download the installation script and then we're going to install it using the first command right there. So I'm just going to come back here and I want to do this inside of the temp directory. That's going to download the installation script. Even before I continue, it's just a good idea to reboot the server because it's a new server and I also did some updates. So let me just reboot to make sure that everything is going to work fine. The installation will go without any hitch. So let's log back into the server, Control L, and I will CD back into TMP. So just go back and copy the command for downloading the script. And then we're going to install it. So I should have rebooted the server before downloading this, but it's okay. That's not a problem. I will Control L to clear the screen, and then I'll do Shift Insert on Git Bash to paste. And we can wait for the installation. Of course, you're going to select certain things. Here, the first one comes. Here's the first one. Do you want the beta version or do you want the stable version? We're going to go with stable. What version do you want to install? I will go with number 1. You should also go with number 1. The one that comes with recommended software for the Ispmanager Lite Pro or the host version. So I'll go with number 1. Which server would you like to install? If you want to run Open Lightspeed, you can go with number 2, but I'm going to go with number 1. If you're following along with me, just go with number 1. This is something you can change later on in the panel, and I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video. When we do an Ispmanager overview, I'm going to show you how you can change the server. So I'm just going to go with number 1, and then in this case, I'm just going to choose MySQL. So just let the download continue, and once it is done, I'm going to come back and we're going to log into Ispmanager. This installation takes a while, so just give it time to complete. Just be patient and wait for the installation to complete. There we go. Finally, the installation is complete. You can log in using your IP address. Since I added my hostname on Cloudflare with an IP record, I can use that to log in. tutoru.xyz, and then you add the port. There we go. Proceed. I'll need a login and a password. So what do they say? They say that my login is root and the password for root. So I don't know my root password, so I'm just going to set one. I don't remember my root password. I want to set this up as my password. Pass wd for root. This will help us change the password. Shift insert to paste. Shift insert to paste. So the password has been updated successfully. So I can use that to log in. Control V, the password, and then log in. Accept the end user license. I agree. The next step would be for you to activate your license. So if you already have a paid license that you bought, then you can activate it. But I'm going to get a free trial license and I'm going to show you how you can activate it right now. So you can click there, or you can just come down here under license management. And this is where you can activate. This is where you can add your license key if you already have one. You can click there on activate license. If you want to buy one, you can click on buy. If you already have a license, you can get your license and just paste it in here from wherever you bought it from. I'm going to create an account on Ispmanager, and then I'm going to generate a license, a free trial license that I can use here. You can also just click up there and you can click there, choose tariff, and that's going to give you this option. You can see here you can generate a free trial license. You can also buy the Lite Pro or Host licenses, but I'm just going to go with the free trial. I'm going to click on select. I'm going to click on register to create an account, and then email address at outlook.com. I will accept all this and then register. All right, now you're inside of your Ispmanager account. Here under products and services, you can get your license, Ispmanager licenses. So you can see I don't have a license. If I click on order, I can get a free trial. So I will order the free trial, order, and I can just click on activate. Let's first of all verify this. So just check your spam folder to ensure that you're not missing out on the email. So you can check your spam or your junk email folder to activate your account. Now we can continue. So you can see one has already been ordered. Free trial for my IP. So I can just delete this one because I seem to have regenerated another one. If you want to do anything with it, you can edit it. So while I'm here, if you want to change the IP address for your license, just click on edit like I've done, and then you can change the IP address here. Maybe you change your server IP, you can add the new IP address there. So I'm going to copy my license. So if you change anything, make sure you click on OK. You can also regenerate the key. So coming back to my panel, under license management, I can click on activate license. I will paste in the license and then activate. We want to make sure that our license is active. So if I refresh the page, you'll see that my trial has been activated. If you have a working license, you can just activate it in the same manner. All right. So just come here under license management and you can activate your license. You can order your license from Ispmanager. If you come here under licenses, you can order a new license. There you go. So that's how to order your license. And just a recap, if you want to change the IP address for your license, just come back under Ispmanager licenses, click on it, and then click on edit. And then you can change your IP address there. All right, that should pretty much cover this tutorial on how to install Ispmanager. Let's do a brief overview of Ispmanager so you can see what it looks like. So that is the dashboard. It will show you the details about your server, and it will also give you links for various things. And then you can see how your server resources are being consumed. So everything you need to do on your panel will be right here. Some of these links will not be available depending on the user. If you're not the root user, that is the super user, then some of this will not be available. Under sites, this is where you're going to see all the sites that have been added on your panel. This will be where you can add a website. If you need to add a new site, need to edit a site, all the options you're going to find here. And we'll see how to do this at some point. And then databases, of course, this is where you can manage your databases. You can create a database. You can also add database servers, but that's tutorial for another time. Something that we're going to do is, of course, we'll see how we can create a database and then access the database via phpMyAdmin. We're going to look at that at some point. And then mail, this is where you'll find your mail settings. You can create a mailbox, you can create mail domains. All this will be here. You can edit all the mail items right there. And then SSL certificates. If you generate certificates, if you need to use them, you'll find your certificates here. All the details for your certificates will be here. You can generate Letsencrypt certificate. You can also buy certificates from Ispmanager on your account. So you can look at that when you log into your ispmanager.com account. Domain names, DNS settings. You can set up DNS here. When you create a new website, of course, you'll need DNS settings to let the internet know where people should go to when they visit the domain. And I'm going to show you how you can set up domain on Cloudflare. And I'm also going to see if I can do a tutorial for how to set up a private name server system whereby you can use your domain as the DNS provider as your name servers. And then if you need to set up cron jobs, that will be here. You can see the current cron jobs which are here. You can also click there and you can create a new cron job. Backup. The backup module is not configured, but you can handle your backup here. You can set up your backup right there, and we're going to see how to do that at some point. And then the file manager. The file manager, of course, this is where you can upload files, you can download files, you can compress your files. All that you can do on a browser using the file manager for Ispmanager. And then users, we are going to create a user, and this is important because if you want to run a website, you're running a website publicly, you should definitely use a user with less privileges to create their resources like websites, DNS settings, and so on, mail. All that you should do using a normal user, and we're going to see how we can create a user. So here under users, something else that's important is templates. So templates is like rules that you're going to set up and give to your different users. For example, you want a particular user group to only have 10 domains or only one domain, 2 databases, 3 emails. That's something you can do under templates, and we're going to see how we can do that. And then FTP users, of course, you know what this is. If you need to access your files via FTP, you can set up an FTP user with their credentials and then use those credentials to send files to your server. And then modules, if there is anything that you want to add that is not available, something that you want to use, you can look at modules and see which one is appealing to you. Just make sure that you read all the information about this because some of them are paid. You can always read more about this from the documentation, or you can contact the Ispmanager support if you have any questions about things like this. And then let's come down to settings. Now here under settings, there are lots of things, but let's cover this because most of these as the root user or as the super user are very important. So let's start with web server settings. Here under web server settings, just go through all this. You can see here you can enable HTTP2. You should definitely enable that. And then all these others, if there's anything that you don't understand here, you can always just copy the name, put it on Google, and then try to understand what it is and what are the implications of anything that you're doing here. And then system settings, you can see my server already has a server name. This is taken from my host name. You can change this host name as well on your server via SSH, and I do have a video for changing server host name. And then if you need to change the time zone, your region, your location, your server time, all this you can change. You can change all these settings here. And then if you want to update the software automatically, you can check that. Definitely leave this to automatic update. Update Ispmanager products. Update all system packages. You can also allow that. And this is going to update your server software as well. So you can check that. And then the update branch, you can change this to stable or beta, but of course you want it to remain unstable if you're running this in production. In case you contact support on Ispmanager, you can always grant access to the Ispmanager support. Just click there to enable that. And you can ensure that the passwords that are used on your Ispmanager panel will be strong. And then log rotation, how many days do you want to keep the logs? You can change that there. Now, software configuration, this is one that is important. Let's look at it. Right now, you can see these are what's running on our server. Anything that's running has that active. If something is not running, you can also enable it to run. So if anything here is not already installed and you click on it to enable it, it will get installed and get activated. Let's see how you can change your server from LAMP to LAMP. You don't want Apache on your server, or you want to use Open Lightspeed. Let's see how you can do that. So if you come here under web, you can click on it and then click to edit. So right now you can see Apache is enabled, Nginx is enabled. Open Lightspeed cannot work if you have Nginx and Apache enabled. So if you want to use Open Lightspeed, you're going to have to uncheck Nginx, and you also make Apache do not use. And then you can enable Open Lightspeed, and if it's not already installed, it's going to install it and activate it. So maybe you're sure that you just want to use Nginx and PHP FPM. In that case, you can enable Nginx and disable Apache. When you do that, of course, you have to turn on PHP FPM, because if you don't turn this on, you won't have a way to run PHP applications with your Nginx. You can also enable page speed if you wanted to improve performance for your different websites at the server level. And then PHP Composer, if you have certain things you want to install, such as Laravel, Magento, you can turn on PHP Composer. And then if you make any changes, make sure you save. In my case, I'm just going to leave it as it is. When you leave Apache on and Nginx on, you will have the option to choose which one you want to use when you're creating your website. So I'm just going to go back. If there's anything here that you want to edit, you can always edit it. So here under name servers, let's see what options we have. You can choose the name server software that you want to use. If you want to use Bind, or you want to use Power DNS, or if you're going to use Cloudflare, you can just turn this off so that it doesn't consume any resources on your server. So if you want to install PHP, you will have to come here under software configuration. You can install or uninstall any that you don't need. For instance, I don't think I have anything that will need to run PHP 5.6, so I can just click there, and that's going to delete PHP 5.6. If you want to add PHP 8.2 as well, you can click there and it's going to add it and activate it. If there is anything here that you want to use, you can always activate it, and that will make it available. If you want to enable VPN on your server, you can enable WireGuard. PHP settings, back to PHP settings. So if you select that, you can manage extensions, change the settings, main settings. You can look at the main settings. You can change the settings here, execution time, max input size, all that you can change right there for the main settings for your PHP 8.1. If you want to change it for a different PHP version, maybe PHP 7.4, that's going to modify for PHP 7.4 as well. Webscripts, if you need to install anything, all these are available for you to install. If you want to install WordPress or any other CMS modules, all of them will be here, and you can install them through your site. Once you create a website, you can install any of these that are available here. Let's just jump all the way to panel settings. So here under panel settings, if you want to enable SSL for your panel, we can do that right now. I'm just going to click there on add. Here under SSL, make sure that the domain is currently set as the server name for your Ispmanager. And you can see mine is already set up. So you can change that in your host name. Just go to your server SSH, change the host name, and then make that the name of your Ispmanager server, and we saw that somewhere here. I will give it that name. Of course, we want to use Letsencrypt. If you have an existing certificate, you can use that, and you can add your certificates right here under SSL certificates. And I'm going to create the certificate. Once I do that, you'll see that a certificate has been issued for that. So now if I take this link and let me open it in a private browser, in a private window, and you'll see that right now we have a certificate that is secure. It is not a self-issued certificate. You'll notice that you don't get the warning telling you that this is not secure, and that is only possible if you're using a domain or a subdomain to log in. If you log in via the IP, you'll still get the warning. Administration, this is important. If you want to use user import, maybe you have users from another panel, you can import them into your Ispmanager server. Administrators, you can create administrators. Right now we only have root, but it's advisable to create another user. So if I want to edit this, I can always edit it, and you can make any user super user. If you want to change the password, you can change the password there. And then the firewall. So you can add any rules. Ports, if you want to allow a specific port, or you want to deny for a certain IP, you can do that here. You can reboot your server. That is under administration. And then the shell client, you can also run commands here. If you need to do anything on the shell, you don't have to log in. You can just log into your panel and run what you want to run in there. And you'll see that's running there. And then monitoring and logs. If you want to restart a service, under monitoring and logs, you have services you can restart. If you want to restart Apache, you can restart Apache. Anything you want to restart that is active, you can always come in here and just restart it. If you want to restart multiple things, you can restart multiple things right there. I'm not going to restart anything, but you can restart, stop, or you can auto start any item that is in the list of your services. And then network services, have a look at this. If you want to add fail to ban rules for anything, you want to add fail to ban rules for Nginx, select Nginx, and then go to fail to ban rules and see what is active. If none of this is active, you can select enable, and this is going to enable these rules, these fail to ban rules for the service. Anything that you're running, just make sure that you have the rules enabled for fail to ban. So if you go back, we look at fail to ban rules. That's basically how you can enable any rules for any service that you're running. You can see that has been enabled, and that's going to enable that as well. And you want to make sure that they're active so that they're being protected, being monitored by fail to ban. You can look at your background tasks. If you have any tasks that are running in the background, you can stop them right there. Active sessions, you can see who's logged into the server. Right now, I'm the only one logged in as root. You can stop any session that you don't want logged in. So you can also look at logs. So the things that I've just done, you can see the logs have been pushed to the top. So you can check your logs right there. Look at the details to see what happened. And then access logs as well. You can see when your panel was logged into, you can check that in there. And then www request logs, you'll find that there. There are no requests right now. Notifications, if there are any notifications for your server, you can check the notifications right there under monitoring and logs. Look at the documentation for more options about all this. And then finally, the system information. Our CPU is premium AMD provided by DigitalOcean. And then disk space, all that you can find there. I don't have a swap, but you should probably create a swap, especially if you have 1 or 2 GB RAM and you're running Apache. Make sure you have swap on your server. And I do have resources for that as well, for how to create a swap file on your VM. And license management, we did look at this at some point during the installation. You can go back and watch how to activate your license, how to change the IP address for your server. Help, if you need help, you can go to the documentation. You can watch various video tutorials. Now, Facebook community suggest, and you can also contact Ispmanager support on their website. That is an overview, a general overview of Ispmanager. If you're looking for a cPanel alternative, you can see what Ispmanager looks like. In this video, let's talk about users. We're going to create a user, and that is the user we'll use for creating our resources, such as websites and so on. So if you go to the Ispmanager documentation and then come to user accounts, you can read more about users here on the documentation. So there are 3 user levels. I'm just going to click on that. We have the super user, the administrator, and the normal user. You can come here and see the differences, but the super user has rules over everything. The super user has control over everything, and then the administrator has admin roles for certain tasks on the panel, and then this is a normal user on your panel. And that's the one we're going to create because it doesn't have much privileges. If you come down here, you can see they can create and manage different resources for running a website and mail. So if you come here, let's click on users, and we want to create a normal user. If you want to create an admin user, you'll have to scroll down here to administration. You can create an administrator. You can also create a super administrator here. So if I was to create an admin, you see that I can give them super user privileges. So if you want to create a super user or an admin, you can do that here under administration. What we are interested in is just a normal user. So I'm going to create a new user. I've clicked on create, but I'm not going to create it yet. I just want to show you something here. You see all these things that we can give to this user. Instead, we can go and create a template instead of having to do this all the time. So let's go back into users. And if you come here under templates, you'll see that you can create a template. Right now, we don't have a template. A template is just like a grouping of user functionality. Maybe you want to give 3 websites, 3 email accounts, and so on. So you'll click there on add. Let's just call this basic user template. We can give them disk space. We'll just leave it as unlimited. Databases, let's say 10 databases. Database users, you can also give them 10. FTP users, you can give them 10. If you're selling web hosting, this is something you'd need to do because users will have to be created based on the template that you provide. So websites, they can have maybe 10 domain names. So this is DNS, they can have 10. Mail domains, they can have 10. Mailboxes, they can have 100. And then access. So pay attention here because this is important. Now SSL, of course, you want them to be able to create websites with SSL certificates. So of course I will give that. And then CGI, you can activate PHP CGI for this account. Yes. PHP as Apache module. Your server has both Apache and Nginx. You can enable this so that they have the choice of using PHP as Apache, or they can use PHP as CGI, or they can use PHP FPM with Nginx. And then for the PHP version, you can choose a default. So I've chosen PHP 8.1 as their default version. And then shell access. If you want them to be able to log in via SSH, you can give this access, but this is something you probably don't want to give your users. So you can just uncheck it. And if they request for it, you can enable it for them. In this case, I'm the only user here, so I can give myself access, but I'm not going to. Default values. Domain encoding, I'll just leave that at none. It will go with the default. And then PHP mode, you can specify the PHP mode that they will use by default. They can use CGI. In my case, I'm just going to go with Nginx and PHP FPM. You can leave it unspecified and they will choose, and you can choose during the account creation process. And then the default PHP version. For this, let's go with PHP 8.1. PHP version for Apache module. This one as well, PHP 8.1. And then the index page, we leave that as default. I'm going to create this template. User templates. Let's go back. And now we can create a user. Remember, users, if you want to get to that, come here, select that. So I'm going to create a user. Let's just call this user Arwahoa. And then the full name is not mandatory. I'm just going to leave it out. And then template, you can select a template here. You can create more templates. For me, I'm going to choose the one that I've created. And once I do that, it's going to automatically populate everything here. All these elements you see, you can change for the user. Which one is missing? So there's an item missing here. Generate a password. Once I enter the password, I'm going to click next. Second step, I can choose all these other options. Create selected objects automatically. Create selected objects automatically. I'm going to leave that checked. Add FTP user. You can add an FTP user. I don't use FTP, so I'm going to disable that. We can come in later and add an FTP user. Create a website. You can create a website right now. If you already have a domain or a subdomain that you want to use, you can create the website right away, but I'm not going to do that now. We're going to do that later. And then add a mail domain. You can add a mail domain. So I'm going to disable that as well for now. And then I'm going to go next. All these items that I'm skipping, we're going to create them at some point. The following objects will be created. Click finish to confirm the data. We're going to create this user. Finish. There we go. Now we have our new user. We can log in as this user. Since I'm the root user, I can actually log in as this user. If I just select on it, I can just log in as this user. If I click there to log in as this user, it's going to log me in as that user. And if I want to go back to my root super user account, I can click there to go back to root. So you see, with a normal user, you don't get a lot of functionality. So even if someone was to gain access to that account, they won't have all the other access to very sensitive functionalities such as web server settings and so on. So that's why it's advisable to use a normal user to create all your resources such as websites, mails, and so on. So if we go back to the root user, we can also log into the panel as that user. So if I was to take this, copy, open it in incognito, Control-Shift-N, enter. We are now logged in as the normal user. If you're giving this account to somebody else, they can do all these things. They can add a website, they can go to the file manager, they can do all these things. Let's do a recap. In this video, we've seen how we can create a user. We've said that the three types of Ispmanager users, the super user and the admin user, can be created under administration, administrators. The normal user can be created there. If you want to edit a user, go back to the user. Maybe somebody forgets their password. You want to reset the password for them. You can just come in here, click that, edit, and then you can change the password there. Let's see how we can set up two-factor authentication for this user. So if you want to set up two-factor authentication, you have to log in as the user. So I'm going to log in as this user. Once I do that, I can come in here and go to settings. And here under settings, if you just scroll down, you're going to see something about two-factor authentication. You can enable two-factor authentication. Just click on the link there. Here we have the QR code. I'll just need to scan this QR code. Scan it on your phone with Google Authenticator. It's been added on my authenticator. The next step is just scroll down. So scroll down to this part, input the code that is currently showing on your authenticator app. And if I just click outside, the button will be activated and I can click on activate. Once I do that, I can save. And that's going to enable two-factor authentication. So let's just test it. We log in as that user and then log in. And now you see that it requires two-factor authentication from your Google app, from your Google Authenticator. We're going to see how to work with DNS in Ispmanager. DNS settings will be found here under domain. If I was to create a domain, it's going to generate all the settings I need that I can use on Cloudflare. I'm going to show you how you can set up the DNS settings on Cloudflare. So if we come back here, I do have this domain, and this is a domain that I'm going to use for most demonstrations in this full tutorial. So you can see the domain is already added on Cloudflare. If your domain has not been added yet, you need to come here under add site, add the name of the site, choose a plan, go with the free plan, and then after that you're going to take the name servers that Cloudflare provides you, and you're going to add those name servers wherever your domain was bought. If your domain was bought from Google, you go to Google and you add the name servers there. If you bought them from Namecheap, you go to Namecheap and you add the name servers there, and that will connect your domain to Cloudflare. So the first thing I want us to do is, let me add a new domain here. I can just add it as a site. If I add it as a site, it will automatically create the DNS settings. So let's say I create a website and I'm going to use a subdomain. You can use a full domain. The domain, we can call it sample. And then the website directory. You can change the directory, but just leave it as something that you can easily recognize when you go to your file manager. And then PHP handler, we're going to use PHP. If you don't want to use PHP with this website, you can always disable PHP. There's nothing to install here. I don't want to install anything yet, but you can install a bunch of other scripts. And then the PHP version, you can change that. Database, do not assign. Right now, I just want to create the domain. So I'm going to create. The next step after the domain is created, you'll need to add SSL. But right now, I know SSL will not be issued because I've not added the records on Cloudflare yet. So I'm just going to uncheck that and close. If you come here under DNS settings, you're going to see that the domain has been added, and you can go in and see your records. So if I select it, I can manage DNS records. If you wanted your website to show up, you'll need to add all these records on Cloudflare. You can see we have an A record for sample, A record for www. You'll need to add all these records on Cloudflare. For instance, let's start with this one. I will copy my IP and let's add it to Cloudflare. So in case you had other records, you can always delete the records if you're not using them. In my case, I'm just going to leave this because I'm going to use this one as well at some point. So add a record. We'll add an A record for IPv4, that is, and then name. Our domain was sample. And then the IP address. And I will save. So right now, even if we go, so you can see it is already recognizing that our IP is on our server. So that happened fast. Cloudflare is usually very fast like that. We can try www. You can see www is not working, but let's come back here and see if we can add the www record. Let's add the www, and I want to add it as a CNAME record. So if I add it as a CNAME, I'm just going to use www.sample, and the target is going to be sample.xyz. And then we're going to save that. The target is going to be sample.our domain. And on Cloudflare, you can just do sample.at, and that's going to replace it like that. And then I'm going to save www.sample. Sometimes this usually takes a really long time to propagate, but let's just see. There you go. If we remove SSL, www is also working. So that's how you can add your domain on Cloudflare. So this is how you can add your DNS records on Cloudflare if you're using Ispmanager. If you want everything else to work properly, make sure you add all the other records. For example, if you will be using FTP, make sure you add the FTP A records. If you're going to use mail on your server, also make sure you add the A record for mail, all these other records, MX records, MX records, make sure you add them for your server if you're going to be using mail. Just copy them and paste them onto Cloudflare. That is how to add your DNS records on Cloudflare. So just in brief, what you need to do, first of all, add your domain here. If you add your domain here on Ispmanager, it's going to automatically create the DNS records here, and then you can just copy them over to Cloudflare after adding your website to Cloudflare. In this video, we're going to see how you can add a website, install WordPress, that is a web script from Ispmanager. We're also going to generate Letsencrypt SSL. Before you even add a website to Ispmanager, make sure that the DNS settings are working. In the last video where I showed you how to add DNS settings, I was using Cloudflare, and you can do the same. We're going to use Cloudflare to handle our DNS. So I'm going to go with this domain, and I'm going to install a subdomain called test. We're going to add WordPress on this. So let's come back to the panel, then go into sites, click there on sites, and then create a website. And then I'm going to add the domain name. So that's my domain name. You can change the directory where you want your website files. And then the PHP handler. If you want PHP, you'll enable PHP. If you don't want to use PHP, you can select not used. And then we're going to install WordPress. So we're going to use the web script that is built inside of Ispmanager, and you can install all this. In this case, I'm going to install WordPress. And PHP, I'm going to stick with PHP 8.1. And then a database, I'm going to say do not assign. I'm going to see what it's going to do with this. But you can always create a new database. You can see I had already created one here. I can select this to use. So I'm just going to say do not assign database, and we're going to see how it handles that, since WordPress requires a database. So I'm going to click there on create, and you can see WordPress is installed. If you look down here, you're going to see this notification telling me that WordPress has been installed. Now we can issue SSL, enable SSL. So I'm just going to go with SSL 4096. Before you issue SSL, make sure that your DNS records are working for www and for the main record. So I'm going to issue. There's something I think I didn't choose. Let's just select that, and I will edit the domain. Something that I didn't choose here was additional here under handler for PHP. Handler for PHP, I want to use CGI. I think I skipped that bit, but I can select it here. I want to change this to CGI. You can try the others, Apache or just that. Database, you can see that's the database that has been created for us. You can see the database settings right there. If you want to do more with your databases, you can go to database. So I'm just going to save that. I wanted to change it to CGI. I've done that. And if I want to visit the domain, I can just click there and open website in browser. If you want your admin details, your details are here. So make sure you save them. And there you go. You'll have your website. Your WordPress is installed on your server. Alright, that's it for this video. You've seen how to add a website on Ispmanager and use web scripts to install WordPress. Note that your login details for your WordPress are there. If you experience any issues with the installation process, just contact Ispmanager support or consult the documentation. Let's see how we can add Letsencrypt, and we're also going to see how to install web scripts in Ispmanager. So web scripts are things like WordPress, Drupal, and we're going to see the options that we have. So first, let's see how we can add Letsencrypt to a domain that doesn't have Letsencrypt already. So here under sites, I've added this domain, and we're going to see how we can add an SSL certificate for this. So come here under SSL certificates. You can see there's one here. When you create a website, usually it will automatically create it for you, but we don't want to use this. I'm just going to select it, and then I can delete. If I want to issue Letsencrypt SSL, I'm just going to click there on Letsencrypt. I will choose a domain. So I'm going to click on enable SSL, and then I can also click on DNS validation. And there are certain records that you may need to add on your DNS provider. So I'm just going to select that, and I want to select the domain I want to generate for blog. And then the certificate name, I'm just going to call it with the domain name. And I can finally issue Letsencrypt. And if you look at this side, you'll see that Letsencrypt certificate issue is in progress. Just wait and the certificate will be issued. And if it's unable to issue it, you're going to get some notification about that. So let's come here under DNS. Let's go to this. Let's go and edit, manage the DNS records for that. And you can see here, you have this Acme challenge. You need to add this record in your DNS provider. For instance, I'm using Cloudflare. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to copy this record into my Cloudflare DNS records. So I need to add a TXT record. I'm just going to add that, and it should be a TXT record. The name I've just copied from the other side. Let's come back and copy the other one. Copy time to live 3600. We're going to add that on Cloudflare. So paste that, and then time to live 3600. 3600, I think that's an hour. So I'm just going to save. Is there another one? Close that. All right, there's another one. Let's copy this one as well. Add a record that is 1 hour. Save that. So if I come back here, I should just give it time and wait. You may use the Letsencrypt log button to check the progress of your certificate, and this may help you determine why the certificate was not issued. And you can see SSL certificate issue in progress. So this is taking longer than is necessary. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to issue another Letsencrypt certificate for this. Don't try to do this many times, because Letsencrypt is going to block your certificate from being generated if you do it after a certain number of times. So that was the first one. Let me just do the second one. I'll just click there on generate Letsencrypt. And this time round, I'm not going to select on DNS validation. I'm just going to select the domain that I want it for. And note that my A records have already been added for this domain, so it should be pointing to this server anyway. So if I just issue the certificate, let's just wait and see. Okay, and this time round, you'll see that the certificate has been issued. So just a word of caution, the only thing you need to do actually is just add the A records. Just add the A records, because it gives a quicker authentication for the domain. So in my case, you see I've added the A record, and I've also added a CNAME for www.blog. And this is going to make it so that a certificate can also be generated for this CNAME of www for that domain. So I can just close, I can just delete this one because I really don't need it. All right. So after installing Letsencrypt, let's see how we can install a web script for our domain. So let's come here to sites, and we want to install a web script on this domain. So what you're going to do now is we're going to install WordPress. So if you select on the domain where you want to install the web script, you can just come in here under CMS, and then you select what you want to install. If you want to install Drupal, you can install Drupal. In my case, let's go with WordPress. I'm going to do a quick install for WordPress. Accept terms and license agreements. Next. And then we're going to create a database for WordPress. WPDB, create a user for the database. We can generate a password, and then for WordPress, we are going to leave the admin user as the admin user, and then you can generate a password requirements. You can see that everything matches. Depending on the web script that you install, there are certain requirements. So if they don't support PHP 8.1, you'll see a red warning there, and you can go and change your PHP version if you are the admin user. And then all other PHP extensions that are required will be shown to you right here. If any is missing, you can always go and install them under PHP settings. Database, right now we only have MySQL, and that's the one that we're going to use. So I'm just going to click next to install WordPress. So if the directory has something, they are going to get overwritten by WordPress. So I'm just going to click there on finish. There you go. WordPress has been installed. If you need to delete it, you can delete it from there. So let's come here under sites. Let me just edit the version of, let me edit the PHP handler for this, and I want to use CGI. And then I'm going to save. You can visit the domain by just opening website in browser. There you go. WordPress has been installed. So in this video, you've seen how you can set up Letsencrypt, and we set up Letsencrypt there for this domain. And then we also installed a web script. To install a web script, choose the domain that you want to use, select the CMS from there. And if anything is not available, let's say you're installing PrestaShop and PrestaShop doesn't support PHP 8, what you can do, you'll just come to the domain and you can edit the domain. Edit the domain, PHP handler, you can change the PHP version there. In this one, let's talk about Site Pro. You can read more about Site Pro on the documentation. If you come here under integrations, you can find Site Pro and you can read more about it on this page. To activate Site Pro, come to modules, scroll down and enable Site Pro. If you're a web host or you're looking for a way to sell a website builder, you can use Site Pro. If you come here under resellers, you can go to panels and you're going to see the supported panels, and you'll see Ispmanager is one of them. If you want to learn more about how to set it up with Ispmanager on this end, just click on Ispmanager. You'll find all the information that you need about installation, update, and so on, and all the other marketing stuff right there. Let's go back to the panel and see if our installation is complete. Click there on install. Let's click on install. There we go. Site Pro is now installed. Let's see under sites if we have any option for Site Pro. All right, there we have the site builder. Let's just click there and go to site builder. This is going to bring you to Site Pro, where you can build a website. Your users can build websites. If they select a template, they can go ahead and start building their website, and it will be published on your domain. Change the template. So come here under reset and change your template. We'll choose that. And now if you come back here and click on edit, if you need to give your users more features, you have to subscribe on Site Pro. They have different plans here that you can choose. If you go to pricing, you can change, you can create your account. So what you'll need to do is just add your license on Site Pro. Just come in here, create your account, and once you're logged in, there is a place where you can add your IP address. You can add the IP address for your server. Let's log in as the other user. And this is a user without all the root privileges. So let's come back here into site. And with this test site, let us go to Site Builder. Let's select a business template. Select small business templates. And you can see that this template comes with multiple pages. So if we want to edit any page, we can come here under edit. And let's say we want to publish. Let's say that's the website that we want to build. I'm just going to come here and we want to publish it. Let's just come here and publish. So give it time to upload all the sites and so on. Right. So that is just a brief overview for how to publish your site using Site Pro. If you need more details about it, come here under the documentation, look at the Site Pro integration and see what it covers. And if you need to learn how to work with Site Pro, you can always find videos on how to use it on YouTube. In this video, let's see how to work with the file manager. If you come here under sites, this is a website that we installed last time. I can come in here and open the website in a browser. So let's go to the file manager. I will come here under file manager. The files for your website will be inside here. Just double click on www. This is a folder that contains your website files. So if you go in here, double click on it, all the files for your website are there. If you were to select everything, we can do all these things which are here. We can archive them. Let's create an archive. So we can give it a name, WP archive. You also have the option to delete the files once they are archived. And that's what I'm going to do. Don't delete the files if you just want to create a copy of the files. Up here, you can also choose the type of archive that you want, but zip is supported universally. So I'll just leave zip and then I can create. Right, so you'll see that the files have been deleted and our WP archive is here. So if we reload the site this time round, you'll see that we are getting this index of error. Here we can just add an index. If you want to create a file, you can add a file. Let's give it a name. Let's give it a name, index.html, and you can also choose the type of file. If you want to create a directory or you want to create a link, you can do that. But of course, you want to create a file. So I will create index.html, create. Now, if we go to the page, we'll see that it will load a blank index page. So if you want to add your website, you can simply upload your files here. And inside here, I only want this file. I can upload it, but if you compress something, it usually uploads faster. I'm going to add it to archive to compress it, and I want to use zip. Okay, we can upload it now. If we come back to the panel, we can upload. So you can just drag in a file in there to upload the file. And I'm going to drag that in there and then click on upload. You can also upload from a remote server. So I'm just going to click there on upload. All right, and you'll see that it's been uploaded there. And we can extract it. You can just select it and then under archive, click on extract. You can choose the directory where you want to extract it. And I'll just leave it extracted there. Or you can create a new directory. So I'm going to extract it. And you can see when I extract it, it's inside here. You can actually move the files. Let's open up the directory by double clicking on it. And then I'm going to select everything. If I just click there, it's going to select everything. And I can click on copy. And I can choose where I want to copy them to. So I'm going to select this directory. I will select move files. You can also overwrite. If there are files that are similar, you can overwrite the files in the directory where you are copying them to. So after the files are copied and moved, I'm going to open that directory. So I'm just going to click on copy to move the files. And if you come here, you're going to see that our files are here. If you go inside of the directory, you'll see that the directory is empty and we can now delete it. So to go back, just click there and you can see the directory structure of where you are. So I'll click there and I will delete this. I will click on it. I will select it and delete it. So to delete, just come here under edit. Under edit, there is open catalog. This is going to show you the content files of the directory, and then delete. And you can see the attributes. such as permissions. So let's click there on attributes. And you can see the attributes of that folder, read, write. If you don't want any file permissions for it, you can remove. So for the owner, these are the permissions. For the group, maybe you want to give group write, you can select that. Maybe you want the group to only have the read access, you can remove execute, and the same is for other. So I'm going to cancel. If you want to add a password to this directory, you can come here under access, click on access, and create a password and a username. That way, if somebody tries to access that directory, they will be required to provide a password and a username. Let's delete that directory. To delete it, just come here under edit and then delete. And if we come here back to the site, so this is just a sample. So if we refresh, you can see it brings the templates that we've just uploaded. And if you want to edit any file here, you can do so. You can just select it, and then again under edit, you can click on open. And that's going to enable the edit mode, and you can edit anything that you need to edit in your file. You can also upload a file directly to this editor. If there's a file that you want to edit, you can upload any file directly. And you can edit. You will be able to edit it. So I can save and close. So back to the editor once again, open. You can choose the mode that you are currently working in. So I can choose that as a Docker file, and it's going to change the mode for that. You can also change the theme. If you want to use a different theme, let's use that theme. Is there any theme here that is dark? Maybe Dracula. And that's going to change the theme. And you can also change these other settings. You can choose the encoding mode. If you are using a file that doesn't support a specific encoding mode, you can change the encoding right there. So you can see the file manager is enough to help you edit your files, upload your files, compress the files, extract the files, and so much more. So that is how to use the file manager for Ispmanager. Let's come here under FTP users, and we're going to see how we can access FTP. In the last one, we saw how we can work with the file manager. Let's see how we can use FTP if that's what you prefer. So I will come here under FTP users, and you can see I don't have an FTP user for my account. So let's add an FTP user. I'm going to add FTP user. Let's just call it FTP user. And then password. And you can give access to a specific directory. If you only want them to be able to access a certain directory, you can give them access to a specific directory. But you can always come here under file manager. If you don't know how to provide access, just come here under file manager. And if you come here under file manager, you can see that is the root. If you want to give them access to any directory, for instance, you just want them to be able to upload files to your website, just come here, give them access to www/www. And if you have other sites there, you can drill it down like that. Just make it something like that. And this is only going to give them access to this specific directory. So if I copy that, if I copy the path and I come back here, I can give them access to just that path. So they'll have access to www/test website, or the website directory that you have. So that's what I'm going to do here, just for demonstration's sake. And then I'm going to create the user. All right. So once you create the user, you can edit the user. Maybe you forget the password, you can edit the user. Once you're done with it, you can delete the account, and you can also disable the account if you don't want it to be used for the time being. The FTP client settings for that user. So FTP clients, you can see you can download FileZilla, but if you're on Windows, the best client I always use on Windows is WinSCP. I don't know whether I have that installed. Let's see if I have it installed. WinSCP, yes, I have it installed. So if you're on Windows, just use WinSCP. If you are on a Mac, you can use FileZilla, CyberDuck. If you are on Linux, FileZilla works. Let's log in to our site via FTP. So the thing is, I have not added the FTP records for my server. All right. If I come here under DNS management and I click to manage DNS records, you'll see there are certain things here about FTP that I've not added on Cloudflare. If you watch the video about manually setting up your DNS records on Cloudflare, then you remember I didn't set this and I'm not going to set it. If you want the website link to be used for FTP, you'll have to add these records there. So at some point, I'm going to show you how you can use your Ispmanager server for your DNS records. So you won't have to copy these records to Cloudflare. I'm going to use my IP address to log in via FTP. So if I come back to WinSCP, the host name, I will add the host name there. And then the username was FTP user. And then the password. And you can save it if you're on WinSCP. You can save it so that next time you just access it easily. Let's log in. Yes. Okay, so let's come back here. Should we use FTP? Save. Don't save. Let's just log in. So for that, I just needed to change it to FTP. So you can see FTP is not secure. Actually, that is not possible because the way my server is set up, it doesn't allow direct login from there. You have to use an SSH key to log into the server. In the end, I would be able to make it work, but in this case, I'm just going to use FTP. And my advice is always just delete the FTP or disable the FTP account once you're done using it. So use it for a short time and then don't leave it on. Just use it, and then once you're done, you come here and then you disable the account. So in this case, you see you're able to download and upload anything. If maybe I want to add something from this side, I can bring it there. Okay. The file will be added here. Maybe I want to download something from my server. I'm just going to drag it here and it's going to download whatever file I've chosen to download. If you need to edit anything, just click there. I can just click there to edit it. So you can see by default, it is using its default editor to edit this. But if I come here, we can do edit with, and I can choose an editor on my computer. I can use VS Code. Okay. And so I can edit any file using VS Code. So in this video, you've seen how you can use FTP, and I'm just going to recap the video. I will close that. To create your FTP account, come here under FTP users, add an FTP user, give them the credentials that you want to use for the FTP user. And then once you create them, you can log in using any client that works on your computer. If you're on a Mac, Windows, Linux, FileZilla works on all three. If you're on Windows, I would suggest you go with WinSCP, and FileZilla will work. There's also CyberDuck. I think CyberDuck works on Windows and Mac. Once you're done transporting files, all you have to do, come here, select it and disable it. And that way, no one will be able to use this user account. So you can see access denied. You'll just continue getting access denied. Once you're done with your FTP account, you can always delete it. In this video, let's talk about databases. Let's say you want to import WordPress into your Ispmanager. One thing you'll have to do is you'll have to create a database. Let's come here under databases. Some of these were automatically created in the last tutorials that we did. So I'm going to create a database. Let's give the database a name. I'm just going to call it DB. And then you can choose the MySQL server. But right now we only have this one. And then of course the encoding, we're going to use the default, but you can change the encoding right there. User, you can create a new user, or you can use an existing user. If you want to create a new user, leave it at create a new user. So I'll just call it DB00. So the password, I will generate a password. I will generate a password. Once you've added all the details for your database user, you can create the database. That's our DB. You can just click on that pencil icon. You want to change the database name, you can do that. Or you can select it, click there to edit the database name, cancel. If you want to edit your database users, just come here under users. And you can see I do have this DB user because I'm the one who created it. I can edit details about this user, the access permissions, and so on. So if you want to change the password, just come in here, give it a new password, click on save. So I'm just going to click on save and leave it as it is. And if you don't need the user, you can delete the user. Okay, let's go back to the database. If you want to back up the database and download it, you can come here under dump. You can import or export. Let's say I want to export. It will export the database. If you want to import as well, you can click there on import. Choose a file from your computer, from a remote server, or a file on this server. You can just select it here. So maybe you upload the file via FTP. You can come in here and select the file. So I'm going to go back to local file. I don't want to import any database, so I'm just going to cancel, but that's something you can do there. Come here under users. For this user, you can just log in directly. You click on Ispmanager. So there you go. If you just give it time, it's going to log you in and you can view your databases. So you can see this user has access to this database. There's nothing in the database. In this video, you've seen how you can work with databases in Ispmanager. You've seen how you can create a database. The database will come with the user. You can edit the name of the database. Maybe you migrate your website from somewhere else and you want to use a different name for your DB. You can change the database name. Once you do so, just click that to confirm the change. You can also access Ispmanager from this side. Just come here and you're going to see the other options here. So just go to database web interface and that will log you into Ispmanager. If you want to work with users, come here under users and you'll see the users that you currently have. If you forget a password for a user, so you can just click there to edit, change the password. You can also change permissions, save, and that's it. In this video, let's talk about Postgres. Now, Postgres and MySQL are both supported on Ispmanager. I have done a couple of videos about MySQL. Now, let's talk about Postgres. So if I was to create a database right now, you'll see that the only option we have is MySQL. Now I can go back to databases. There is an option to add a database server if you're the admin user or the root user on your server. So let's go and do that. As the root user, if I come here under databases, you can see we have this option here for database servers. So I can install a database server and this is going to get installed in a virtual environment by Ispmanager. Another option, since we want to use Postgres, we can just come down here under settings and we'll go into software configuration. And then here under software configuration, we have an option for Postgres server and the Postgres manager. Right? You can see MySQL and Ispmanager are already installed. In this case, let's just select that. And we don't even have to select it. We can just click on this icon here. And this is going to install everything we need for Postgres. So just give it time to do what it's doing. This one as well, we also want to install the Postgres interface manager, that is the PHP pgadmin. And I'm going to click OK on that as well. And let's just wait for the installation for this to complete. And once both of these are green, we're going to go back into databases and see what options we have. All right, you can see that the Postgres server has been installed. Now let's just wait for the interface pgadmin to get installed, and you can see installation in progress. And it seems like it has been installed. And if you come to your dashboard, usually you get to see Ispmanager only, but now at least you have PHP pgadmin as well. Now let's go back into databases and we're going to see if we can create one Postgres database. So I'm going to create a database and I'm just going to call it PostDB. The owner, I will give the ownership to the user that I've been using. And then database server, we want to use Postgres. And you can change all these options depending on your location. User, you can create a new user. Of course, we don't have a user for Postgres, so we definitely have to create one. And then as for the password, I'm just going to generate a password. And then if you want to allow remote access for this server, for this database, you can allow remote access. You have to check that if you want to allow remote access. But I'm just going to click on create. So if you received any error, if you received an error talking about query failed, what you can do is change the encoding to UTF-8. And that's what I did, and the database worked. So let me just create another one. We'll call it db2post. And we want to use Postgres. Here under encoding, change it to UTF. So I'll just use UTF-8. And then create a database user, password. I will generate a password. And then I will create. So just try a different encoding for the database if you receive that error about query failed. All right, so that's how to create the database. Now, if you want to access the web interface for the database, maybe you want to do certain things, edit records in the database, just select it and then click on database web interface. And this is going to automatically log you into your database. This is a database that doesn't have any tables. So if you want to create a table, you can create a table and then just create the table. So I'm just going to end this part here and come back to the panel. So you've seen how you can enable Postgres on your Ispmanager, how you can access the database using PHP pgadmin. And that's it for this one. In the last one, we talked about Postgres and how to set up the server and access your database. In this video, let's talk about alternative database servers on Ispmanager. If you go under Ispmanager databases, you're going to see there's this option called database servers. So let's talk about this. You can just click on database servers and that's going to show you the current database servers that are available, and you saw how we enabled this in the last video. In this video, let's see how we can create another server. These servers will be created virtually. Now, I've not enabled Docker here, and I just want to see what this is going to do. So let's just come here under Create Server. We're going to call this Mariah S. And this will be a MariahDB server. So type, it will be MySQL, and then connect to existing server. So let's just look for Mariah, and I want to install the latest MariahDB. There we go. So the password to access the database server, I'm just going to generate a password there. If you want this to be the default database server for webscripts, you can select that there. If you want this database to be remote accessible, then you can enable that as well. But let's just go ahead and create the database. Docker installation is required. So this is what I was telling you. I have not enabled Docker. So these additional database servers, you have to run them through Docker. So that means I will have to enable Docker, and I can just click there. So after clicking on fill out, I'm hoping that has enabled Docker, or that has added all the required steps for this database to get created, for this database server to get created. So I'm just going to click on create, and you can see that the database server was successfully created. So I'm just going to come back under databases. And if I go to database servers, let's see if we try to create a database, if we can select our database there. So you'll see that if we come here to create a database, this is a database, the database server that we've just set up. And you can create your database using MariahDB, or you can use any of these other servers. So you can see the database server was successfully created. Now let's go to settings and let's talk about Docker for a moment. I will come here under settings and I will go into software configurations. Docker is there. We're going to enable Docker, and once we enable Docker, you'll see the option for Docker will come here. So I'm just going to click there to enable Docker. Docker is going to install everything it needs to work on Ispmanager. Okay, so you see Docker has been enabled. You're going to see that we have an option for Docker here. So let's see what options we have under Docker. So if you go under Docker, you're going to see that the database that we created is going to show up here. Okay, because it's running as a virtual container in Docker. So that's how you can create multiple database servers on Ispmanager. So if you want to create a container here, you can create a container. You can look at the configuration file for Docker. Cancel that. If you have images, you'll see the images there. You can see right now we have MariaDB, and then we're going to create a container. So to create a container, you can choose what you want to run in the container. For example, let's say you want to run MongoDB. You can see here, there's an option to choose Docker Hub, an image from Docker Hub, or you can choose, if you have images that you've downloaded locally, you can use those. So I'm just going to click back on Docker Hub and we're going to do MongoDB. I will search for Mongo. And you can see there we have the official Mongo image. I can select the official MongoDB image. And you can use the tag of latest. I don't know if there's a tag for Alpine. So I'll just go with the latest then. And then RAM. So you can limit the RAM. And I'm going to use 250 MB. And you can add a folder mapping. You can select a folder mapping. Make sure you know the folder structures. Maybe you want it to be in www something, or you want it to be in /var something on your server. You can do that there. You can also add folder mapping 2, another folder mapping, and volume. So you can create a new volume there. Give them volume a name and then mount point inside the container. Maybe you're running Nginx. You'll need to point Nginx to something on your server. You can look at all these options in the documentation for Ispmanager. You're going to see what each of these mean under the Docker documentation. And here I'll go with Lite Pro because that's the version I have installed. And if you want to see which plans has Docker, just come here under the Docker documentation. You'll see that Docker is available on the host and pro versions. So it's not available in Lite version. You have to get host or pro version. The Docker documentation, read all this to see what all the options here can be used for. And then I'm just going to click on create. It's also important to note that if you make any changes to your Docker container configuration file or the Docker configuration using the command line interface, all those changes will reflect in the Ispmanager Docker interface. And of course, we need to give it time to start running. So it's being created as is always with Docker. First of all, it will download the image. And once it downloads the image, it's going to start the container if there is no error. So once the container has been created, we can just select on it and we can start it. So there's an option for to start. I don't know if I did not check that. Let's go to container settings. Basic settings, auto start. Yes, you can add auto start, restart always, restart on failure. If it is a database server, you probably want it to restart always when Docker starts or when your server starts. And when I set it to auto start, you'll see that it just gets started immediately. If you want it to stop, you can also just stop any container that you're using inside of Docker. If you want to run maybe Redis, you can run Redis under Docker. You can create a container, search for Redis, select the official Redis image, go through the settings. You want it to auto start or do not start. You can select all these options and of course make the data persistent using a volume and folder mappings. And you can also add a port mapping. If you want a port to be mapped to your container, you can select the port instead of the port getting generated. And I can create So in this video, we've talked about alternative database servers on Ispmanager, and we've also touched on Docker, and you can play around with this. Look at the documentation to see what you can do with it. So that should mark the end of this tutorial. If you have any questions, you can always look through the documentation, or you can contact Ispmanager support, or you can reach me. So let's see how you can create a mail domain and add mailboxes. So if you want to be able to send and receive mail, what you can do is find a VPS provider that doesn't block the SMTP ports, and you can use lots of different VPS providers that don't block these ports. Some of the smaller VPS providers will definitely not block the port. I think Contabo doesn't block the port. Hetzner will allow you to use the port if you request the mailing ports to be opened for you. To work with Ispmanager Mail, come here under Mail, and I'm logged in as a user that I created earlier. So the first step in using Mail is to create a mail domain. When you're setting up a website, when you're adding your website on Ispmanager, you will always get the option to create a mail domain as well. In my case, I did uncheck those options, and now we can create our mail domain. So I'll just come here. So under sites, let's see the site that we have, and we can create a mail domain for the same site. So I'm just going to take that, copy, and I'll come back under mail, and you can create a mail domain. So I'm just going to create mine now, create mail domain. I will paste. You can choose the IP address that you want to use. If you have multiple IPs on your server, you can select any IP to use. In my case, I'm just going to use that IP. And then the default action. If a mailbox does not exist, what do you want? Do you want to reply with an error, or do you want to ignore and drop, or redirect to email address? So in this case, I'm just going to reply with error. And of course, you want to set up DMARC. This is going to add certain records that you'll need to add on Cloudflare if you're using a third-party DNS provider like Cloudflare. If you're using Ispmanager for your DNS, then this will automatically get added to your DNS records. And then, of course, you want to secure SSL. Make sure that when you're adding a mail domain, you add some of these records as well on Cloudflare or wherever you're using your DNS from. Maybe you're using from Google, or you're using just from your VPS provider. You can always add the DNS records. You'll just add an A record for mail.test. And I can do an example of this. So mail.test, I'm using a subdomain. Maybe you're using a full domain. So if I come here under DNS, we can add an A record, and I'm going to add mail.test, and mail.test will need an IP. So I'm going to take that IP, copy, paste, and save. So ensure it is an A record, mail.test with that. So this is mail.test because I'm using a subdomain. If it is not a subdomain, you just add mail instead of mail.test. And then you can use Letsencrypt, email. So you can add contact person email here, account, and I can create this account. You can see it's asking me to enable SSL, and I'm going to enable SSL. And I will issue a key of 4096 bits, and then issue. So there we go. We have our mail domain. If you want to edit anything, just select it and then edit. And you can change these details. If you don't need to use it anymore, you can disable, you can delete, and so on. Let's go back, and you can create a mailbox. Mailbox are the actual emails that you'll use. We can call it info. The domain, of course, I just want to use that domain. That's the only one I have. If you have multiple domains, you'll select the correct domain there. You can add aliases for this mailbox. Confirm the password. You can send a copy of your emails to another email. Every email that comes in, you want to send it to your Gmail account. You can add an email address there. And then disk space, maybe you want to give 100 MB of disk space. And then we're just going to create this email. There you have your mail. You can open the mail client. You can edit this mailbox. You can look at your mail client settings. Maybe you want to connect it with something. You can look at the mail client settings here. If you want to connect this with third-party mail clients, these are the details you can use, IMAP, that, and make sure that the DNS records for all this are working fine before you try to connect, because they're not going to work if your DNS is not working. So I'm just going to come here, close that. Let's see what option we have on the mail client. So once you select it, Once you select it, let's just click there on Mail Client. There you go. Info@test will automatically log in. Let's try and send an email and see if it's going to arrive. If you want to send email, you can just click there on Compose. And I'm assuming that your DNS records are working and you're using a VPS provider that doesn't block the SMTP port. That's very important. If they block it, you won't be able to send mail. So let's just send. Come to my panel and then come here. Let's see the MX records that we should add on Cloudflare. Manage DNS records. We need to add an MX record. Copy. If you come to Cloudflare, you'll just need to add an MX record, but make sure in the beginning, just add all these records. All the records that will be provided by Ispmanager, just add them. I can just paste tests, and the mail server will be mail.test. Priority, let's use a priority of 10. And then we're going to save. So MX is responsible for mail. You can see my mail has been sent. Unfortunately, it has gone into the junk spam folder, but this can be fixed. If you want to fix that, make sure you add all the correct DNS records. If you come to your panel, there are certain TXT records that you'll need to create. So like this is DMARC, and then there's another one for SPF, this one. You create this and you also add a reverse DNS, RDNS for your server, and that will require that you have a working host name on your server. That's just something that you'll need to do. And this is going to help in authenticating your server as a trusted mail server. So if you're not receiving your mail, your port, your SMTP port is probably blocked. And that means that you will need to talk to your VPS provider to unblock it for you, or you can just move to a different provider. So just in brief, before you can create a mailbox, you have to create a mail domain. Mail domains will usually get created by sites. When you add a site, it will automatically add a mail domain. If it doesn't, you can come in here and add it manually. And I will create. So you can see that's been created. Let's come here and see if the DNS records were created as well. So you can see even when you create the mail domain, it will automatically create the DNS records that you'll require. So if we select that and we check it, you'll see that all the records have been added for that domain. If you're using Google, put them on Google. If you're using Cloudflare, put them on Cloudflare. Welcome back to another Ispmanager video. And this time around, we want to look at backups. If you're the root user or the admin user on your panel, you can come in here under backups and you can enable it. But before we do that, let's come to the documentation. Just come to the documentation and look at backup system. The backup system for Ispmanager uses Isptar. Isptar is a module by Ispmanager. So let's just click on that. You can see what you can do with it. You can separate users. So the Ispmanager backup module separates users. So the backups are not mixed for users. They're separated based on users. And then you can have large archives divided into smaller volumes. The storage format is .tgz. Ispmanager is a module by the Ispmanager team. So you can read more about all this here. Of course, I'm not going to go through this, but just go through the documentation to see what options you have. And then we can look at backup locations. Now, backup locations, you can have Dropbox, Google Drive, Amazon S3, S3 compatible storage. You can use an FTP server, SFTP server. So this is the important thing. This is the most important thing. You have to decide where you want to store your backups. Just feel free to come to the documentation so that you can see what else you can do with the backup module. For us, let's just go back to the panel. If you're following along with me, just go to your panel and then come to backup copies. And then under backup copies, just click here on fill out. And this is going to bring the form that allows you to enable backup. So backup settings, enable backups, storage type, local directory. You can select the default location where you want to store your backups. In my case, I don't want to connect any of this at this point. So I'm just going to select local directory, and that is going to store it on my server. You have to know the space that your server has. If you have a low storage server, you probably need to set up a different server with FTP or SFTP and then connect that here. I would definitely go with SFTP instead of FTP. The path to directory, you can select the directory where your paths are going to get stored. In my case, let's just go with, I can just store it there /backups. I don't know if there's anything in that directory. I don't know if it exists, but I'm just going to select that for now and see what happens. And then limit total size of your backup. You should definitely limit this. So I'm just going to go with 10 GB for now. And then full backup copies, I will go with 3. And then daily backup copies, I will also go with 3. All these options, you can look at the documentation here and it's going to explain everything. Backup, system, general information. Make sure you read the documentation because I'm just going through all this to show you how it works. But you should definitely go through the backup documentation for Ispmanager. You can exclude certain files. If there are certain files that you want excluded, definitely exclude them. And then exclude databases. If there are certain databases you want to exclude, you can exclude those databases. Maybe for security reason, you don't want your database to be together with that. You can select all databases and they will not be backed up. You can select the time when you want the backups to be checked. When do you want the system to check that there are new items that needs to be backed up? That will start at 3. You can do it at 2 a.m. Just select the time that you want your backups to start. Extended settings there. Start time and then server time. So this just shows the current server time, and then backup copy, password. You can secure your backup with a password. I'm going to save. If you secure it with a password, it will get encrypted. So you can create a copy on demand. You can do a full backup right now. You can do a panel settings backup. You can do a user backup. I have certain users, so let's see the options we have there under users. I'm going to select, you can just back up a specific user and all the details will be backed up. So the backup will start and then you'll see the backup is there. If you want to back up your full Ispmanager server, click there on full backup copy. The full backup copy, that will back up the entire server. If you refresh the page, the backup is going to show up there, and this is the user backup. So I can select it and you can go and view your files. When you view your files, you'll see that this user has some web content. If you want to restore any user, if you have multiple users you've backed up, you just select the user and you can restore, you can delete, you can download, and so on. So let's just go back. At least now you see this is how you can restore your user. Let's go back to the backups. You can look at settings again, backup configurations. So just remember that your backups will happen every day at 2. Let's go to the user and see if the user has the option to backup their system. So I'm logged in as the user that I created earlier on. If you come here under backup copies, the user can also create their backups. So when they do that, it is going to create a backup and download the backup. So you can create, and that's going to create a backup and then download it for the user. And you can see this is a backup that we created in the root account. And since it belongs to this user, it is showing up here for this user, and they can download it if they need to use it. They can look at the details for this backup. If they want to do anything with it, they can look at the files, user, and they can select what they want to restore. If they want to restore www, that's available for them there. If they want to restore a database, they can select the database, click there on databases, and they can select the database that they want to restore or download. So in this video, we've seen how you can work with the backup system in Ispmanager. So if you're the admin, you have to enable the backup system so that it's available to your users. If you don't enable it, it will not be available to the users. If it is not already enabled, you saw how I did that in the beginning of the video. Just click there on backups and then fill out, and that's going to bring in the form with the settings that you can select for your backup, auto backup, and user backup. So that's pretty much it for this backup video. Just remember to go and look at the documentation so that you can understand everything about the backup system. In this video, let's talk about certain server protection measures that Ispmanager provides. Something that I had already covered and is also part of server protection is two-factor authentication. So make sure you enable two-factor authentication for your users. You can show them how to do it so that it secures their account. First, come here under Ispmanager documentation under tools. You're going to see there are certain things here. You can look at firewall rules. You can also look at integrations. There are certain things here that cover security. So just come in here, look at all these integrations, enable the ones you can enable, and Cloudflare, definitely enable this one. It will automatically work with your Ispmanager, and there is a guide for how to set it up. So just click there and you'll see how to add the API key, how to generate and add the API key on your Ispmanager panel. So let's come to the panel. We can come to the panel and let's look at some of this. You see we have DDoS guard, DDoS. This will protect your server from DDoS attacks. Let's click on install DDoS guard. The module will get installed, and then after that you're going to see what options we have. Click on modules and you'll see that DDoS guard has now been installed, and we can look at the settings. So you can add a domain to be protected. If you want to protect multiple domains, just click there, add domain, and you can select all domains or you can select specific domains. Cancel. So as the root, you can enable DDoS protection for your users. Once they add a domain, just come in here, click on add. Let's say we select all domains and then next. You'll input your DDoS details right there. So you have to go to the DDoS website, DDoS guard website. You can come back here. You can put in the access details to authorize Ispmanager. Now let's go back to modules. Let's see what else we have. As I said, go to the documentation. Make sure you have enabled Cloudflare as well. So if you want to buy a license for DDoS guard, you can just buy it right there. And then all these other options, kernel care, this one, these are security features. You can also install this. It's going to install the module. Okay, the installation is complete. Go back to modules, kernel care. You can look at the settings and then you can install this to complete the installation and then install kernel care. Yes. Of course, you need to activate the license for this. So just go back to modules and see. And then you can patch the kernel. You can roll back patches. So when you use kernel care, you don't have to restart the server. So get your license and enter the license right there. So of course, I don't have a license. I'm just going to skip this bit, but you can always come in here and patch the kernel. If anything needs to be updated, you can just click there on patch. If you want to roll back anything, you can roll back. If the kernel will require any patches, if the Linux kernel will require any patches, you'll see the details right there. Right now, there's nothing to be patched, so there's nothing to show. Let's go back to modules. Let's see. There's another one here. Of course, Immunify as well. Install that and just come back to modules, click on settings and see the options that you have. And then Dr. Web is an antivirus. If you have users, serious users on your panel, then go ahead and set up Dr. Web. You can buy the license and see how it goes. If you come here under integrations, you're going to see this Dr. Web. Read more about what you can do with it, how you can install it right there. That pretty much covers the modules part. So let's go to fail to burn. Fail to burn is a very important one on your server. If you want to work with fail to burn and you want to see what the documentation says about it, come here under tools and you will find it under network services. So just read all that, but let's just get an overview of how to work with fail to burn on Ispmanager. So if I come back to the panel, let's go to monitoring and logs. If you want to work with fail to burn, you'll come here under monitoring and logs, network services. And let's say you want to enable fail to burn for Apache. You're just going to click there and you can look at the current rules that are set up for Apache. And if you want to see which rules are active, you can see the status is showing active. If a rule is not active, you can just enable the rule. If you want to enable a rule, you can just click on it and then enable, resume that. And you'll see now it's enabled. Sometimes in certain services, you can actually enable multiple rules at the same time. Let's see if that is true for Apache. So fake Google bots, all this, once they get in, they will be blocked. So let's just click there on enable and see if we can enable multiple fail to burn rules for these Apache services, and you can see that is possible as well. So if you want to enable for all these other services, click there, enable, okay. And that's going to enable fail to burn for all these services. Now for each service, you can change the fail to burn rules. For instance, Apache authentication or Apache bad bots. Let's click there and let's change the rules for fail to burn. So let's go and edit. And here you'll see that attempt number. So the attempt number is how many times you want to give leeway. How many times do you want somebody to try something or a server to try something before it is blocked? So here you can put maybe 5 times. It depends on what it is. If it is something that you know is bad, maybe you can make it 2. And then the burn time. How long do you want someone to get burned? So after 2 attempts, they will get burned maybe for this number of seconds. And then of course, maybe you want to whitelist your IP address. So you can enter your IP address there. So you can list a subnet, you can list a DNS server name, or you can just separate IP addresses using a space. So you can add a second IP after that space. If you don't want to get banned, you can always add your IP address in the list of the whitelisted IP addresses. So I will cancel that. Let's go back. It's just the same process. Let's say you want to protect Nginx. You'll just click there on Nginx, and then you can click on enable, or you can look at the current fail to burn settings. The current fail to burn settings, you can click to apply to all rules. You see, you can apply it to all the rules in Nginx, and you can do the same for Apache. Let's come back here in Apache, and we can go to fail to burn settings, attempt, number of times, burn, how long do you want to burn. Sometimes you want to burn things based on the service that is being accessed. Nginx, let's come back to Nginx. Let's look at the fail to burn rules that are possible for Nginx. So you're going to see bot search. This is something maybe you can burn for a long time because it's a bot. Nginx HTTP authentication. This one as well you can burn for a long time. But when it comes to limit request, probably this is someone who's just been excited and clicked on a page multiple times, or it could even be a bot. And sometimes you don't want this to go for a long time because the ban may go for so long when it is not necessary. The limit request on your Nginx server, maybe you want the burn time to be different, you can edit that there. But if you prefer to have everything have the same settings, you can just come in here and apply to all the rules. So it is just the same for all these processes. If you want to burn anything, you can come in here, look at the fail to burn rules which are available. For SSH, maybe you can edit and see the options which are there. Maybe at some point, maybe you're feeling like you're being targeted, you can increase the burn time tremendously because this is 10 minutes. 10 minutes may not be enough. Just in brief, how to use fail to burn. Come here under monitoring and logs, and then come into network services, and then enable the fail to burn services that you want. For your named server, you can enable, or you can look at the fail to burn settings. You can look at the fail to burn rules and enable it. You can see it is not enabled. Just enable that. And you can ban IP addresses that break certain rules on your server. So let's just go through how to set up two-factor authentication, even though I did a video for that. So if you want to set up two-factor authentication for your user, you have to come in here under the user settings. And then you will go all the way down, enable two-factor authentication, scan the QR code which is there, and then enter the code that will be shown on your Google Authenticator. And once you enter the code there, just click on activate. Click outside, then click on activate, and that's going to enable two-factor authentication. And if you want to disable two-factor authentication, you'll just come back and there will be an option for you to enter a code. Enter the code that you can see in your Authenticator app, and then click the button, and that's going to disable two-factor authentication. So other things about security, of course, you need to set up your server the right way and make sure that everything is working fine. You can set up SSH key authentication, disable user login on your server. And you can also change certain ports. SSH port, you can change the SSH port. That will reduce your attack surface because the default port is 22. If you change it to a different port, any port that looks for port 22 will automatically get blocked, and you can set that up. So just look at how you can set up your server. Go through server security. I do have an initial server setup for Ubuntu, Debian, and CentOS. So if you're using any operating system in that line, you can always find those videos. And I have a playlist that has a video for initial server setup. So you can find your operating system and then follow the initial server setup for your server. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Most importantly, make sure you utilize the Ispmanager documentation if you have any questions. And of course, if you're subscribed to the panel, you have access to Ispmanager support. You can contact them with all your questions and any issues you're experiencing. That's it for this video. I will see you in another one.